Today, there's something beautiful about surrendering to the rhythm of God's timing. But let's be honest, it's not easy. We live in a world that glorifies speed, rewards instant gratification, and makes us feel like delays are denials. But God doesn't operate on our timetable. His timing is never rushed, never delayed, and never off. God's timing is perfect, always. You may be in a season right now where it feels like nothing is happening. You're praying, you're trusting, you're doing all the right things, but heaven seems silent. Doors are closed. People have moved on. Your heart is growing restless. And you're starting to ask the question we all ask at some point, God, when? But friend, what if I told you the delay is not a punishment? What if I told you that this moment of stillness is actually a part of God's divine strategy? What if God is not saying no? He's simply saying not yet. You see, in Ecclesiastes 3:11, it says, He has made everything beautiful in its time. Not in your time, not in my time, but in its time. That means the breakthrough, the healing, the open door, the answered prayer. It's on the way. But it will only arrive when it aligns with God's perfect plan for your life. Sometimes God holds things back, not to frustrate you, but to protect you. You think you're ready, but God sees the full picture. He knows what's ahead. He knows who needs to come into your life and who needs to leave. He knows the battles you're not prepared for and the blessings you're not mature enough to handle yet. When God says, wait, He's not withholding something from you. He's preparing something for you and in you. He's stretching your faith, strengthening your character, deepening your trust. He's positioning you so when the blessing comes, you don't crumble under its weight. You carry it with gratitude and grace. I want to remind you today, you are not behind. You are not forgotten. You are right on schedule, God's schedule. When God makes us wait, it often feels like a closed door. We assume that delay means denial, and we begin to question whether our prayers were heard at all. But the truth is, God's delays are never wasted. Every moment of waiting is pregnant with purpose. What seems like a no might actually be a not yet. And within that space, God is doing His deepest work in our hearts. We tend to measure progress by visible movement, but God measures it by trust. He's more interested in who we're becoming than how fast we're moving. In the Bible, we find countless stories where God delayed His response, not to frustrate His people, but to fulfill something far greater than they imagined. Take Abraham and Sarah, for example. They were promised a child, but the child didn't come for 25 years. In that long wait, their faith was tested, stretched, and purified. When the promise finally came to pass, they realized it was worth every moment of uncertainty. God wasn't late. He was building a foundation strong enough to carry the blessing. Many times when we face a delay, we interpret it through the lens of rejection. We think we missed our chance or that maybe we weren't good enough. But God's kingdom doesn't operate on human schedules or emotional timelines. His plan for your life is not fragile. It doesn't fall apart because things didn't happen when you expected. Instead, it unfolds step by step, according to a timeline designed by the one who sees all, knows all, and works all things together for your good. Delays are often God's way of protecting us from what we're not ready to handle. If we received everything we asked for right when we asked for it, we wouldn't be able to carry the weight of it. God sees the storms ahead, the battles we don't even know are coming, and the growth still needed in our hearts. So He pauses, not to deny us joy, but to develop our character. He lets the roots go deep before the tree bears fruit. That kind of delay is not a curse. It's a blessing in disguise. In moments of delay, it's easy to try to take control. We start looking for shortcuts, pushing open doors, manipulating circumstances, all in the name of helping God. But every time we do this, we trade divine timing for man-made outcomes. We get what we want, but we miss what God was preparing. The greatest dangers don't come from waiting. They come from rushing. Waiting requires faith. Rushing often reveals fear, and fear is the opposite of trust. God is not just interested in giving you something good. He wants to give it at the perfect time, when it will do the most good and bring him the most glory. That timing may not match your calendar, but it will match your calling. The waiting season is not idle, it's intentional. God is aligning relationships, opportunities, and even the condition of your own heart to receive what he has planned. We must remember that God's silence is not absence. His delay is not indifference. He's working in the unseen. Behind the curtain, he's orchestrating things that you wouldn't even know to ask for. And when the time is right, it won't just feel like a blessing. It'll feel like a miracle. The door that opens after a long wait often leads to a room filled with purpose, not just relief. You'll know in hindsight that the wait wasn't a waste. It was preparation. It's easy to trust God when things are going our way, when life is smooth and the path ahead is clear. But when confusion sets in and we're surrounded by uncertainty, that's when our faith is truly tested. We begin to question if God sees us, if he understands what we're going through, or if he even cares. But while we're limited to what's right in front of us, God sees the full picture. He sees what you can't. And that truth changes everything. God's perspective is eternal. Ours is temporary. We're focused on the immediate, the urgent, the visible. But God sees beyond the moment. He sees the ripple effect of every decision, every opportunity, every relationship. He knows how one closed door today might open 10 better ones tomorrow. He understands how a detour will lead you away from disaster and toward your destiny. When we see a roadblock, God sees redirection. When we feel overlooked, God sees the right time that's still coming. He is not blind to your pain or indifferent to your struggle. He just knows that the process matters as much as the promise. There are moments when you feel forgotten, as though your prayers have gone unanswered. But it's in those quiet, unseen moments that God is doing some of his deepest work. Just because you can't see the breakthrough doesn't mean it isn't happening. God is moving pieces into place, organizing people, resources, and circumstances that will all come together in a way you never expected. If you saw what God saw, you wouldn't worry another minute. You'd wait with confidence. Think about Moses. He spent 40 years in the desert tending sheep before God called him to lead Israel. From the outside, it looked like a man who had missed his calling. But God wasn't done with Moses. He was preparing him. The desert wasn't a punishment, it was a classroom. Moses didn't see what God was doing, but God did. And when the time came, everything Moses had walked through made him the leader the people needed. What looked like wasted time was actually divine training. God's perspective also takes into account your spiritual growth. Sometimes we want the promise without the process. We want the blessing without the burden of becoming someone who can carry it. But God knows what you need to go through in order to handle what he's preparing. He sees the strength that needs to be built, the humility that must be rooted, the faith that must be stretched. That's not something we can always grasp in the moment. It only becomes clear when we look back and realize that every no and every not yet served a higher purpose. When we trust that God sees more than we can, we stop trying to force things into place. We stop stressing over every unanswered question. Instead, we rest in the knowledge that we are guided by a God who knows the end from the beginning. He knows what will harm us and what will heal us. He knows the people who need to exit before we enter the next season. He knows the timing that will make the breakthrough truly matter. Often, what looks like a setback is actually a setup. What feels like loss is a lesson that saves us later. God allows certain things to fall apart so the right things can fall together. We can't always understand it in real time, but hindsight reveals the wisdom of God's timing and the depth of his vision. So instead of focusing on what we can't see, we need to lean on the one who sees it all. Because when you truly believe that God sees what you can't, peace replaces panic and trust overcomes fear. Waiting is not wasted time in the kingdom of God. It may feel unproductive, even painful, but it's one of the most powerful seasons for personal transformation. While we often want to move quickly from promise to fulfillment, God uses the in-between space to do the most meaningful work in our lives. Growth happens in the waiting, not when everything is going our way, not when doors swing open easily, but when we are still uncertain and yet faithful. That's when God deepens our roots and strengthens our foundation. In the waiting, God refines your character. You begin to let go of pride and impatience and learn humility and surrender. You become more aware of your dependence on Him. Without the distraction of constant movement, your heart becomes more sensitive to His voice. You start to see things differently. What used to seem like a delay begins to feel like an invitation into deeper trust. You begin to realize that the growth isn't in the arrival, it's in the journey. The wait becomes sacred, not because it's comfortable, but because it transforms you in ways that nothing else can. The waiting season is where God trains us in endurance. Just like a muscle that grows through resistance, our faith matures through delay. If everything came to us immediately, we would never develop the resilience needed to carry long-term blessings. We might celebrate a short-lived success, but we wouldn't have the strength to sustain it. God knows what it takes to prepare us for the future He has in store. The waiting isn't just about holding out until the promise comes. It's about becoming the kind of person who can handle the promise well. When you read Scripture, you'll notice that many of the people God used most significantly went through long periods of waiting. David was anointed as king, but waited years before taking the throne. During that time, he didn't sit idle. He learned to worship in caves, to lead under pressure, to fight giants and battles of the heart. It was in the waiting that God developed the king inside the shepherd. God wasn't just preparing the kingdom for David, He was preparing David for the kingdom. This season of waiting also teaches obedience without results. Can you still follow God when nothing changes? Can you still serve Him when you see no reward? That's the kind of obedience that purifies motives and builds spiritual maturity. God is not just looking for people who can worship in the victory, but those who can worship in the silence. When you obey without evidence, you're declaring that your faith isn't based on outcomes, but on relationship. That's the faith that moves mountains. Waiting also exposes what we truly believe. When we don't get what we want, right away our doubts rise to the surface. We begin to question God's love, His presence, even His promises. But it's in facing those doubts that our beliefs are strengthened. The waiting gives us a chance to confront the lies we've believed about God and replace them with truth. It invites us to shift from shallow belief to unshakable conviction. We stop chasing signs and start resting in who God is, faithful, constant, and good. There's also something deeply healing about waiting. When we stop striving and start abetting, our hearts find rest. We may come into the waiting restless and anxious, but over time, we begin to let go. The stress, the worry, the pressure to prove ourselves, they begin to melt away in God's presence. And what we're left with is peace. Not the peace that comes from finally getting what we want, but the peace that comes from knowing that even without it, God is still enough. In every delay, God is doing something sacred. He's not punishing you, He's preparing you. The longer the wait, the deeper the roots. And when the breakthrough comes, you'll see that it wasn't the destination that changed you. It was the waiting. We often associate God's power with dramatic moments, instant healings, sudden breakthroughs, miraculous changes. And while God certainly moves in those ways, we overlook how frequently He works quietly behind the scenes, preparing us for those very moments. There's a pattern in Scripture and in life. God's sudden miracles are almost always preceded by seasons of quiet faithfulness. What looks like an overnight change is usually the result of long-term obedience and patient trust. That miracle you're waiting for is not delayed. It's being formed in the hidden place where God sees your persistence, your tears, your unwavering faith. It's easy to believe that nothing is happening because we don't see any visible results. But faith isn't about what you see. It's about what you believe when you see nothing at all. God often works in the dark, underground, like roots growing beneath the surface. Just because the tree hasn't broken through the soil doesn't mean growth isn't taking place. In fact, the strongest part of a tree is its root system, and it's developed long before the branches ever touch the sky. In the same way, God grows your roots in seasons of waiting and faithfulness. Sudden breakthroughs are the fruit of consistent obedience. When you choose to pray, even when you feel like giving up, when you continue to serve others without recognition, when you hold on to God's promises with no evidence in sight, you are planting seeds of faith. And God is never unaware of what you're sowing. He sees every step you take in faith. And when the time is right, he will cause a harvest to come forth that you didn't even expect. That moment will seem sudden to everyone else, but to you, it will be the evidence of God's steady, quiet work over time. Think about the story of the Israelites at Jericho. God told them to walk around the city once a day for 6 days, and then 7 times on the 7th day. For 6 days, they saw nothing change. The walls didn't crack. There were no signs of progress, but they kept walking. They stayed faithful. And on the 7th day, after all their silent obedience, the walls fell suddenly. It wasn't the volume of their shout that brought the walls down. It was their obedience in the quiet days that built up to that breakthrough. What looked like a miracle was really the culmination of days of trust. Many people miss their moment of breakthrough because they quit just before the walls fall. They grow weary from doing good, from praying without results, from walking when the path feels pointless. But the Bible reminds us not to grow weary in well-doing, for in due season we will reap if we don't give up. God honors the steps you take when no one is watching, the prayers you whisper when your faith feels small, the acts of love you give without applause. All of these build spiritual momentum. And when the moment comes, God brings it together suddenly. It's also worth noting that God's sudden movements are never rushed. They feel immediate to us, but they are the result of his perfect planning and timing. When God moves suddenly, it's because everything has finally aligned. Your heart, the circumstances, the people involved. He is never hasty, but when the moment arrives, he does not delay. He releases the blessing that was being prepared for you, and it comes faster than you imagined. Your responsibility is not to force the miracle, but to remain faithful in the process. Keep showing up, keep obeying, keep believing. What God does suddenly will be directly tied to what you've done consistently. And when it happens, it will be clear to everyone that this wasn't random. It was God's hand moving right on time. There is a tension in the life of every believer between trusting God's timing and desiring immediate answers. Our human nature leans toward impatience. We want to see quick results, instant progress, and immediate breakthroughs. But God operates on a divine schedule that often doesn't match ours. He is not governed by clocks or calendars. His timing is not based on what we feel is urgent, but on what he knows is right. Trusting God's clock means learning to let go of the anxiety that comes with not knowing when and choosing instead to rest in who holds time itself. We often feel like time is slipping away from us. We fear missed opportunities, late answers, or wasted years. But what we don't realize is that God is never in a hurry and never too late. He operates with eternal vision, not momentary pressure. He sees what's ahead while we're still processing what's behind. He's aligning people, preparing situations, and even maturing our hearts to be ready for what's next. The reason it hasn't happened yet may have less to do with denial and more to do with divine preparation. The life of Jesus reflects this beautifully. When Mary and Martha sent word that Lazarus was sick, Jesus didn't rush to heal him. He waited. And in that waiting, Lazarus died. From a human standpoint, Jesus was late. But from heaven's perspective, Jesus was right on time to perform a greater miracle. What looked like a delay was actually a setup for resurrection. This teaches us that God's timing is not just about solving problems. It's about revealing his glory. If he always responded on our schedule, we would never learn to trust him beyond what we can control. When we start trusting God's clock, we stop comparing our journey to others. Comparison breeds discouragement, especially when we see others receiving the very things we're still praying for. But just because someone else's blessing came earlier doesn't mean yours is denied. It means their time came. Yours will too. Trusting God's timing means believing that he hasn't forgotten you, even when someone else seems to be walking in the very promise you've been waiting for. Their breakthrough is not a threat. It's a reminder that God is able and active. This trust also teaches us contentment in the now. We begin to realize that every season, even the one of waiting, has value. We stop racing toward the future and start embracing what God is doing in the present. We stop obsessing over what's next and start living with purpose today. That shift in perspective brings peace. Not the kind of peace that comes from having everything figured out, but the peace that comes from knowing the one who does. Faith in God's timing brings freedom. It frees us from striving, stressing, and forcing things to happen. When we trust his clock, we no longer need to manipulate circumstances or rush decisions. We move with the rhythm of grace, not the pressure of fear. We can rest knowing that what is meant for us will not pass us by. The right door will open when the moment is right. The opportunity, the relationship, the healing, it will come at the appointed time, not a moment sooner, not a second too late. The truth is, if God gave us everything we wanted when we wanted it, we wouldn't grow. We'd rely on our timing instead of his wisdom. But when we wait, we're forced to trust, and trust is where real faith is formed. That faith becomes unshakable because it's not rooted in outcomes, but in a relationship with a God who is sovereign, loving, and always on time. Every tick of his clock is working for your good, even if you can't see it yet. There is a deep tension between wanting to control life and learning to surrender. Most people spend their lives trying to manage, plan, and predict everything around them. They believe peace will come when everything is finally in place. When the job is secure, the finances are stable, the relationship is thriving, and the answers are clear. But real peace doesn't come from control. It comes from surrender. When we truly believe that God is in control, we let go of the illusion that we need to be. Peace is not the absence of problems. It's the presence of trust. It's the inner confidence that even when we don't know what's happening, God does. Even when we can't see a way forward, he already has the path laid out. Anxiety often flows from the need to understand everything before it happens. We feel unsettled because we're trying to figure out a future that only God can see. But when we stop demanding clarity and start resting in God's sovereignty, something shifts inside us. We stop asking, how will this work out? And start declaring, God is already working. Surrender doesn't mean giving up or being passive. It means giving over. It means saying, God, I release this situation to you because you can carry it better than I can. It means acknowledging that our strength is limited, but his is endless. It means choosing to let go of our timelines, expectations, and strategies, and inviting God to lead the way. And in that surrender, peace begins to flow. A peace that isn't tied to circumstances, but anchored in the presence of a faithful God. There is power in simply being still. Psalm 46:10 says, be still and know that I am God. Stillness is not laziness, it's trust in action. It's the refusal to panic when things don't go as planned. It's choosing to remain grounded when everything around you feels uncertain. Being still is one of the hardest things to do when life feels chaotic, but it's also one of the most powerful declarations of faith. It says, God, I trust your hand even when I don't understand your plan. When we surrender, we allow God to surprise us. We open the door for him to move in ways we never expected. Our tight grip on control often limits what he wants to do. We think we know the best outcome, but God's plans are always bigger, deeper, and more lasting. The job you lost, the door that closed, the relationship that didn't work out, those things may feel like setbacks, but they may actually be setups for something greater. Surrendering to God means trusting that He's writing a story that's better than the one you were trying to write for yourself. It's in the surrendered heart that God speaks most clearly. When we stop trying to manage every detail, we start to hear His whisper in our spirit. We gain clarity, not from having everything figured out, but from walking closely with the one who does. And the more we practice surrender, the more natural it becomes. It shifts from a moment to a lifestyle, a daily choice to place everything, our worries, plans, hopes, and fears into God's hands and leave them there. Peace is not found in everything going according to our plan. Peace is found in knowing that even when nothing goes as planned, God is still good, still in control, and still worthy of our trust. Surrender is not a one-time decision, it's a continual practice. And every time we let go, we make room for the supernatural peace of God to flood our hearts and calm our minds. It is in that sacred exchange, control for trust, that we discover the life we were truly made to live.